Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Codonics safe label system and how it integrates into anesthesia practice through healthcare informatics. I'm going to discuss its impacts on medication safety, workflow, technology integration, legal and ethical implications, and its relevance for anesthesia providers. So today we're going to explore Codonics and its integration within the healthcare informatics system, and we will encompass the following key topics: an overview of the Codonics safe label system and similar systems, significance of the safe label systems in healthcare informatics, regulatory standards governing those medication labeling, legal and ethical considerations related to med labeling, as well as its impact on patient safety, and what concerns we have regarding privacy and security, as well as the relevance to anesthesia workflow. So despite the advanced technology available in the operating room, the preparation of medications remains a manual process for CRNAs and other anesthesia providers. Anesthesia practice is still characterized by a high degree of independence, as providers are responsible for drawing up, labeling, and administering the drugs on their own. And this can lead to errors, particularly in high pressure situations, with labeling mistakes representing a significant portion of the anesthesia related incidents. So the solution to this problem would be something similar to a safe label system. So Codonics is more than merely a label printer. It verifies medications through barcode scanning, generates standardized labels, and can automatically log medications in the anesthesia record. And this is a point of care barcode scanning and label printer system that should integrate and does have the capability of integrating with anesthesia information management systems, as well as your EHRs and your Pyxis machines or whatever the hospital uses. So the system scans the medication vials before preparation, prints the standardized labels, and we'll talk about those standards here in just a second. So on the presentation through PowerPoint, it's not going to allow me to play it on the recording, but I included the YouTube link here, and it gives you a very brief, about 2-minute overview of how the Codonics system works. And if you go through the similar videos, you can find other safe label systems as well that do very, very similar mechanisms of barcode scanning and interoperability. So why does this matter in informatics? The system serves as a prime example of healthcare informatics. It leverages technology to enhance accuracy, documentation, and patient outcomes, all while generating shareable clinical data. So we enhance patient safety through automation and standardization. We're able to support med tracking and audit trails, and it allows us to collect data for quality improvement and research, as well as that interoperability that I was talking about between devices and anesthesia integration and information management systems and EHRs. There are several regulatory standards, and this was new to me when I started learning about medication standardization in anesthesia. It's something that is kind of an afterthought when you do something every single day. So medication labels are required to adhere to stringent standards, and Codonics complies with both the international and ASA standards, guaranteeing consistent labeling to minimize the risk of drug mix-up. So the International Organization for Standardization, or the ISO, established in 2008, they established an original set of requirements, but in 2020, they revised this as the definitive standard for user applied labels on syringes containing any drugs used during anesthesia. So this standard specifies exact requirements for the labels to ensure the consistent medication identification across clinical settings. So the standard colors, size, design, and general properties of the labels, as well as different typographical characteristics of wordings for drug names like tall man lettering and things like that you've already heard of. So in the United States, the ASA, or the American Society of Anesthesiologists, has added on to this and established its own statement on labeling of pharmaceuticals for use in anesthesiology, which aligns with but expands upon the ISO. And this addresses the American healthcare environment. So the ISO is kind of a regulatory that you may see across even in different countries, but the ASA governs our healthcare. And so this guidance specifies 9 different classes of drugs with reserved background and text colors, including induction agents, benzodiazepines and their antagonists, neuromuscular blockers and reversal agents, opioids and opioid antagonists, antiemetics, vasopressors and hypotensive agents, local anesthetics, anticholinergics, beta blockers, you name it. So, and you've probably already seen this. Maybe when you did your shadowing, like phenylephrine is a purple label and the font is always the same with the tall man lettering. So when medications and when the labels follow these consistent formats and color schemes, the providers are able to quickly and accurately identify medications regardless of which institution or technology generated the label. And this standardization becomes particularly important as healthcare systems start and we're increasingly sharing patients across facilities and as providers move between institutions throughout their careers, especially for some anesthesia practice models where you may be floating hospital to hospital. So there are some legal and ethical considerations, even though it sounds like a no-brainer. And technology also has both legal and safeguards and potential risks. So when a hospital implements safety technology, yet providers choose to disregard it, the chances of liability rise. And so from an ethical standpoint, it's imperative that providers use tools designed to prevent harm to patients. And that is our goal, is always to prevent harm. And so healthcare institutions have to carefully navigate these contracts with technology vendors like the codonics vendors and ensure these system failures or errors don't expose them to more liability. So when barcode medication systems fail to alert providers to a potential error, questions always arise about whether these institutions' reliance on the technology maybe created a false sense of security that ultimately could have contributed to the patient harm. So all considerations that we have to think of before we implement these things into our practice. But there are still also ethical obligations. Beneficence, it requires that anesthesia providers and professionals use healthcare informatic tools to genuinely improve patient care rather than just create documentation for our own legal protection. So these have to help our patients and not just create a paper trail to protect us or cover our tails. This means that ensuring that the technology integration focuses primarily on preventing errors rather than simply just recording them after they occur. So research indicates that codonics enhances safety, but its effectiveness relies on consistent usage. That seems like a no-brainer. And in one study, incentives such as coffee gift cards led to a doubling of scanning rates and boosted compliance from nearly over double, from 25% to 58%. And so what we find is that if we have better outcomes if we are incentivized to use a product. So when we talk about workflow, that will make more sense. But evidence from multiple healthcare settings demonstrates that barcode medication administration systems can significantly reduce medication errors when properly implemented and utilized. And this research examining the codonic safe label system specifically found that system-generated labels achieved 100% compliance with safety standards compared to 75% compliance under manual labeling practices. So this improvement in label quality directly translates to reduced risk of medication selection errors, as these properly labeled and color-coded syringes enable faster, more accurate visual identification, even in a challenging condition such as a dark OR or an emergency situation. So the more accurate your labels, the more accurate your alerts are for allergies, expiration dates, drug interactions, the safer our patients are going to be. And we have to consider privacy and security, and HIPAA compliance is paramount. So Codonics integrates with patient data systems and necessitates compliance with HIPAA regulations. And the new HIPAA guidelines place significant emphasis on cybersecurity because everything's electronic and mandating proper documentation, encryption practices, and secure contracts with vendors. And so the medication documentation generated by barcode systems contains sensitive patient information, including patient identifiers, oftentimes, as well as diagnoses, administered medications, dosages, provider actions, our initials. This information qualifies as protective health information under HIPAA regulations and requires that we maintain and hospitals have the appropriate safeguards throughout the life cycle of the technology. But privacy concerns do extend beyond basic HIPAA compliance to include the proper use of medication administration data. And although the main goal of medication documentation is clinical care and safety, the detailed EHRs created by Informatics system allow these secondary uses that may raise other privacy concerns. So healthcare organizations might analyze this aggregated medication administration data to detect practice patterns, evaluate provider performance, or support quality improvement efforts. However, these analyses have to be performed in a way that respects individual privacy and avoids the inappropriate judgments of clinical decisions. If I, as a provider, choose to use rocuronium and reverse with or as I'm sorry, reverse with sugammadex, that was my clinical judgment, and that this data should not interfere with that. And that's just a very brief example. The security design of the medication label systems also have to address the unique risks of the operating room environment. So barcode scanners, label printers may be targets for tampering or sabotage, according to research, and especially in facilities where you may have a concern for controlled substance diversion. So that's something to consider. And then business associate agreements between healthcare organizations and technology vendors has to clearly define their security responsibilities, ensuring that these vendors maintain these proper safeguards for any PHI or protected health information that they access during the system maintenance or support activities, anything like that. So, what kind of workflow improvements can we have with a safe label system like Codonics? It offers instant printing of labels in the correct format, eliminating the need for any handwriting. Sounds awesome. And it not only accelerates workflow, but it does enhance patient safety. So, the traditional anesthesia medication workflow involves manually preparing your drugs from vials or ampules, handwriting the information on the adhesive labels, applying that label to the syringe, and then later documenting your administration in either your paper or your electronic anesthesia record. And that process is really established in a lot of facilities and with a lot of experienced providers. And so this established process, while it's familiar, contains a lot of opportunities for error, including illegible handwriting, inconsistent label formatting, delayed documentation, and the absence of verification mechanisms. So um, the Codonic Safe Label system fundamentally redesigns this whole workflow by introducing a technology at multiple points, particularly the one that is right there at your workstation when you are going to pull meds before the start of your case. So scanning the vial barcodes during preparation and automatically generating the standardized label, potentially even scanning the labels before administration and electronically documenting those actions in real time. Now, there are some challenges, and human factors matter. So, providers skip steps if the tech slows them down. Leadership must encourage adoption and remove barriers such as poor device placement. So, scanning syringe label barcodes should ideally occur immediately before administration rather than after, allowing alerts about potential problems to interrupt the medication administration process before the drug ever reaches the patient. However, implementing that workflow change represents a significant departure from the traditional anesthesia practice, where we typically document after rather than during medication administration. Imagine trying to scan in between your RSI drugs. That seems crazy. So anesthesia providers, we typically document them in the AIMS systems after administration. Still, for intra-op clinical decision support to be maximally adequate, medication documentation should instead occur immediately before administration. So you pull the drugs from your Pyxis, you put the label that's printed simultaneously, and you scan it into the MAR in your desired dose, and then you can always go back. And the physical placement of the label printers and barcode scanners significantly affects this usability. So if it's positioned too far from your med prep area, it may not be used consistently. And scanner ergonomics matter as well. So handheld devices are typically preferred over fixed scanners that require you to move syringes to a specific location. So if you can take that scanner and walk over to your anesthesia machine, that would be the most ideal situation. So hospitals and companies have to consider this when they are integrating these new informatics technologies. So how does this apply to nurse anesthesia practice? Aside from what we've already talked about, as CRNAs, Integrating informatics skills and new technologies has become essential for safe anesthesia practice, and we have to understand the new informatics and medication technologies. It should assist us, not replace us in our clinical judgment, and we have to take the lead in implementation and help train our colleagues and ensure that technology enhances and not dictates our clinical care. Those are my references for the presentation. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.